You know, craft is a weird term nowadays. Like, Goose Island was craft, but they're not craft, right? And so on and so forth, who you've been bought by. So, I don't know, it's hard to say, like, is my beer more craft than Devil's Backbone? I don't know. But I kind of look at it, I want to define the industry to start defining itself as through independence.
My experience with brewing was the big guys eat the little guys.
Nobody had done what we were doing, and everybody told me I was crazy.
Lunatic Larry down by the railroad tracks selling beer in a bag in a box.
There are lots of opportunities to be scared, but we worked our asses off.
To be Baltimore's brewery, we want to represent the tough Baltimore image, but the love that's here as well.
This was my dream.
I would have never envisioned being where we are today.
We've changed beer in the world.
I never worked at a big company. I'd made that decision early on that I didn't want to go into the corporate world. I was unusual among craft brewers at the very beginning, and even today, in that, you know, I come from 6 generations of brewing. I was familiar with more than just scaled up home brewing. I was familiar with how do you really make beer? And what I was very cognizant of that I got from my dad is if you want to make beer and sell it to the public, you gotta guarantee that every batch is gonna be great beer.
I had a neighbor who said, God, you make great beer, you should open a homebrew store. I went from home brewing to home brewing supplier of ingredients and advice, and opening a brewery seemed to be the next logical step in that path. When I was deciding to start the brewery and sell the homebrew shop, I had the opportunity to buy the bike shop that I had managed. It was like, I can buy this bike shop now. I know how to do it, I know how to run it. It'll be easy, but I'll always wonder if I could have made it as a brewer.
In the beginning, you're doing this thing because it seems really cool, and you know, Jeff was a home brewer and we were newly married, and we both had a lot of interest in beer and, you know, the very nascent world of American craft beer. We weren't afraid. We maybe should have been a little more afraid than we were, but I think both Jeff and I felt like we can always go back to day jobs.
I wound up working for a small European-style bakery in Kalamazoo called Sarkozy Bakery. I was their first full-time baker. They hired this other guy who was a nice guy. He wasn't that great of a baker. One day after work, he said, hey, do you want to come over to my house for some homemade beer? Sure, and he had a quart bottle and he opened in the sink and it foamed all over and it wasn't very good. I thought, well, but he's not a very good baker, and I bet I could do better. Went out and bought a kit. I still have the book, The Maltese Flagon. It's an awful book. I don't think they mention hops in it.
So after college, I took a job as an assistant brewer down in DC. They weren't giving me very many hours. I couldn't pay my bills. So I left and I went and I worked at special ed school for a couple of years. But in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to brew beer. That's all I wanted to do. I met my girlfriend, now wife, there, and she kind of encouraged me, if you want to do this, you should look into it. As I started to get older and I was in my 30s, it was like, what's the future for me? And I didn't know what that was. I was working at Gordon Biersch. It was a great job. I was making good money, but I didn't know what my next step was going to be. I never sat back and thought, one day I'm going to be an entrepreneur, or one day I'm going to own a brewery. And so when we first decided to start this, kind of like, I'll be my own boss, that'll be nice, can brew the beers that I want to brew. And I didn't really think about what that meant at the time.
I wake up scared shitless every day because, you know, this is all quite fragile. I mean, the story of the world is that, you know, you get this band of revolutionaries and they bring new energy, new thought, you know, new approaches, and they win for a while. But ultimately, power and money and efficiency eventually grinds them up.
It is kind of one of those crazy American bootstrap things.
Shit, Charlie. Nobody had a clue what was going to happen to us.
How many barrels of hoppy, bottle-conditioned beer is America going to be able to consume?
That was the first paradigm shift that we had to make.
Well, I think among the pioneers of craft brewing, we all took different approaches. There weren't that many of us, and there was no playbook, no cookie cutter, no how to do this. Craft beer was still very tiny, cottage industry among sort of a very small group measured, in a couple of dozen zealots who were passionate about beer when the rest of the population really didn't give a shit about good American beer. They didn't even, the idea was an oxymoron.
There were no Belgian-style beers made in the United States in 1991. So we were introducing people to a whole new way of thinking about beer. That was all pretty much unheard of. Beer with fruit, beer with, crazy yeast strains that add a level of complexity.
Our brewing technology was probably 1950, 1960 technology. We were culturing our own yeast. I was making some of my own malt. I was roasting my own grains. I was going to Yakima and selecting hops. We spent a lot of effort going to beer festivals, going to supermarkets directly, going to liquor stores, going to restaurants. I mean, it was, we had to educate people about what beer was, what craft beer was.
I had no money for bottles. Nobody would sell me bottles. But I had a license to sell other people's beer. So I started selling Huber beer and other quality imports. People come buy Huber beer for like $5.99 a case, but then they drink them and they bring them back. And we had this big trough, and we could get 40 cases in there, fill it with hot water, and Huber had terrible glue. The labels would float off, and we'd individually wash each bottle, sanitize them by hand, rinse them by hand, fill them and cap them by hand, and label them by hand.
People wax poetic about the good old days, and I always think, yeah, right. Those were the ones where we were all working 15 hours of work, and you just bottled beer until it was done.
So we're brewing a batch of our alt beer right now, the Vault Alt. So we won a gold medal for us at GABF in 2012. And this is where we make the beer. I spent the majority of my career at brew pubs where a regular paycheck was nice, and like it was 6 o'clock. Hey, it's not my problem anymore. I'm going home. And now with this, everything's my problem. Yeah. Oh, you're right. This is broken. Why is that like that? Did somebody hit it?
Maybe it's trying to force too much grain through.
That is crazy. I wonder why that's like that. Yeah, we gotta take a look at that. All right. We didn't take paychecks for the first 2 or 3 years. We paid some bills, like everybody's mortgage and rent was paid for, and like my kid's daycare was paid for by the brewery, but I didn't bring any money home. We lived off my wife's salary.
Even before we had the doors open, when we had run out of money a bunch of times and kept sort of groveling back to family and friends to borrow a few thousand more dollars here, and I couldn't have saved face, I think, to everybody who had thought our dream was crazy, but we had the energy and passion to make it happen, and then to walk away from it after all that time invested, I think, was just not an option.
The other thing was just how hard and how competitive and how corrupt the beer world really is.
We were so excited we were going to have this distributor in Denver and it was going to be great, and so we sold them a bunch of beer, and we called them the next week and said, you ready to buy some more beer? And they said, no, we're fine. So we called them the next week and they said the same thing. And by the third week, we were like, this doesn't seem right. We went down to their warehouse and it was still shrink wrapped. They hadn't sold any of it. It turns out they didn't really intend to sell it. They had another craft brand and they wanted to try to figure out how to grow that craft brand and not us.
I was trying to get a $40,000 loan from the bank. And I go in the one day, oh, this is the vice president of the company here. And he says, you've never missed a payment, and we agree that you're becoming profitable, but our bank was just bought out. We don't want to be in the beer business. So this guy I went to college with, who's a professor at Kalamazoo College, he set me up with some guys he knew in Chicago for a $90,000 loan. I paid 23% interest. They wanted a life insurance policy for $250,000, which I said, no, no way.
How much is all this going to cost us, Bonnie? The kind of plans you're making, it'll take us a year to get our dough back.
I'll worry about the dough, Steve. Well, with a setup like this, we ought to be able to turn out 5,000 gallons a week.
You didn't do the 23% loan, did you?
Yeah, 23%. I paid it off early. Paid 23% on that.
Going into places and being like, hey, will you sell our beer, especially when we first started, was really weird. There's a lot of pay-for-play stuff, so you know, we went to one place and we're like, hey, you know, we're a New Baltimore brewery, we have this beer. Well, you know, unless you're gonna give us the kegs for free, we're not gonna put it on. Oh, well, why would we do that?
Well, I still have this business plan that I wrote. It's very embarrassing now, but the plan was that it would take 5 years, but we would eventually reach 5,000 barrels a year. That was as big as I thought we could get.
Jeff said, if we can just sell 90 cases of beer a week, I think we can make this thing work.
I had two goals. One was barrelage to 30,000 barrels. And personally, financially, I wanted to make $100,000 a year.
If I could only get to 12,000 barrels, that would be nirvana. We'd have enough cash flow. I must have done some calculations that, you know, at that point we would be on easy street.
I was like dead wrong about the 5 years that it would take to get to 5,000 barrels. It took like 5 months.
Well, you know how it is right now. If you're not growing, you're dying. 30,000 barrels came and went pretty quickly.
When we got to probably 3,000 or 4,000 barrels, that's about the time I went over and bought the brew house in Germany, and we were sort of on to the next phase.
Had no idea how big we could be at that point. It was just, the roof came off. And I thought, I gotta find out what are the limits here.
Whoever's got the capacity is gonna win. We were growing at 30, 40%. We were struggling to keep up, but every bit of our capacity we had to do with cash flow. So we couldn't grow until we saved enough money to buy another tank, and then we put it in, and then we grow some more. And so we were really challenged with that whole growth thing back in the days we were bootstrapping.
That is fairly unique in this business, being able to control your destiny by being both frugal enough and flexible enough and brave enough. We were a lot like Ken in that regard.
The other alternative that was very frustrating for us to watch was the contract brewing, which was happening in the mid-'80s and onward, where brewers didn't even make their own beers. You know, they weren't going through the pain and struggle of doing what we had done, which was quite hard to build equipment and then to finance with cash flow. They just, when they sold more beer, they'd order more beer from a contract producer. And so that was frustrating to watch, and I wouldn't say we were tempted, but there were times when we were like, God, that's so much easier. But once you do that, you're done. Once you use that model of growing, you've lost quite a bit of your credibility.
Oh gosh, I've made so many mistakes. One that almost took the company down. I had this dream of renovating this old brewery. I think I borrowed a couple $1 million. I raised another $7 million, so I had like $8 or $9 million. The bids came in and they were $15 million. At that point, I already had $2 million invested, and I pulled the plug on it. And I remember thinking, okay, I've now just vaporized $2 million. That is more money than I have made in my entire life.
It's like death by 1,000 cuts. It's not one big thing that just leaves you reeling and like, we can't possibly do this. It's like, and now there's this, and now there's this.
At the end of the day, after the thing cratered and the dust settled, I thought, well, I just really wanted to have a brewery. Don't risk what you have to get what you don't need.
We still haven't fully set this up how we want to set it up. We've only been here for about a month. But so this is kind of the packaging space. Can storage is over here, cold box is over that way, and then we have offices down that way. So when we knew we were going to outgrow our old location, and we saw this building very early on, it's 140,000 square feet. We knew we didn't need that much space. We needed about 50,000. What we looked at was that like our tasting room allowed people to come in, meet us, see what we're all about, try our products, put a face to the brand. Why couldn't we do that for other businesses in Baltimore? At the same time, why can't we try and bring back some of that manufacturing to the city? So Zadie, who's pictured on that box, he's a 98-year-old World War II veteran. He's Adam's grandfather. He comes in every day and folds all our boxes for us. So we just won best brewery in Baltimore again for 2018. When we wrote our kind of mission statement, one of the things was to be community focused. So to be Baltimore's brewery, we wanted to represent the tough Baltimore image, but the love that's here as well.
We started Union 6 years ago. We were three guys that we love beer, we love Baltimore, and we wanted to figure out how to incorporate both those loves into one thing.
If you don't care enough about the quality of the product, the quality of your culture, and the experience your people have, and the customer and their experience with your product, if you don't care enough about that, you're not going to make it. You cannot care too much.
We're trying to build a company to last. In that case, you do have to make investments that maybe are hard to justify today, but with the idea that this is a long-term strategic thing to do. We are looking at what do we need to do today to make sure we'll be in a good place to succeed into the future.
We started with employee ownership in 1996. And I was always looking at ways to acknowledge to my coworkers that it took all of us to get beer out the door, and to be able to say that we did this thing that helped a lot of people.
You recording this? We're going to start Recontrol again.
Feel what it's like to own a part of a business. I think that's really where the more compelling success comes from.
Crafting the perfect beer is impossible. You can get closer and closer.
Yes, that's going to be doing unconventional things.
Craft breweries are driving culture in America with music and the arts.
I really believe that business can be a force for good, and the work that we've done at New Belgium has been a model for that I'm extremely proud of.
It becomes a different thing now. It's a different challenge, right? We're managing people and we're figuring out kind of more complex stuff as opposed to before where I was just, making beer. And so it's a different challenge, which is nice. Not to say I don't miss just making beer every day and going home and that's it. But at the same point, I like the company that we've built, like the team that we've assembled. And so I think it's a different kind of reward in what the business is now, or what my aspect of the business is.
Put together a map of what matters to you. Codify what you believe in. Question your capability at it. Improve your practice of it so that you really can feel like the things that mattered to you got attended to.
When we opened the bar in 1993, there was no smoking and no TVs. That was kind of radical. You know what? You got to come in and talk to people. It's kind of like the pub in England where it's anybody and everybody. So you can have a couple of suits sit next to some hippie kids, sit next to the regular who's there every day to tell you the same story you've heard a billion times. And it's the sort of thing that I think the big brewers would never do because they want to sell to the lowest common denominator. And us craft breweries, we enjoy letting our freak flag fly, and we all fly it a little bit different, but we all kind of fly it.
As I get older, I kind of think and look and be like, I want more people to appreciate what we're doing and how great this culture is. Beer really is 99% asshole free. I want people of all races and backgrounds and genders to kind of come in and feel welcome here and feel welcome in this community. As a business, if you kind of think that mindset too, that like, hey, if I expose my business and my mindset to different people and different cultures, they're gonna bring different ideas and different flavors to my beer and different knowledge and stuff. So I just think it can only make your business better to be more diverse.
At the foundation of craft brewing is a desire to make something beautiful and share it.
At the end of the day, you know, having people enjoy your product in a manner that you intended and to be able to have a great experience, you know, whether you're here at the brewery tap room or 2,000 miles away.
We collectively own this thing together. I think it's really important that tiny brewers are doing what they can to help as well as big brewers.
Like I say, I don't need to be the biggest brewer in the world. I need to make really damn good beer, all malt beer, pure and unpasteurized. That's what I care about.
We've never really had that we need to be the biggest kind of goal. We'd like to be the best.
You know, I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. I didn't set out to just have a company for the sake of having a company. I wanted to make beer.
I do think there is a particular entrepreneurial drive, and not everyone has that. You just persist, even in the face of, cues that might suggest you should give up.
I think by staying local and making good beer and having this connection to your community is the easiest way to stay relevant.
This was my dream. I had 150 years of pride and passion and craftsmanship all around beer behind me. It's pretty easy to get up the next day.
I am to this day still amazed that we're here, and I still have pinch me moments all the time.
I would have never envisioned being where we are today.
We've changed beer in the world, and it's going to get tough. The big guys are going to be out there, and they did this in the 50s and 60s when they went into markets and had really cheap beer to try and put somebody out of business.
It'll be very tough to achieve the same things that Sam Adams and Sierra have, and a lot of other breweries, New Belgium, have achieved in these kind of 50-state craft breweries.
I don't see things getting a lot easier going forward for a lot of people who are currently in the industry.
Pendulums do swing. I think in our contemporary craft beer marketplace, I think Ken is probably right.
Ultimately, we may all be doomed, but it's going to take 40 years, and we're going to have a hell of a ride for 40 years, and I'm okay with that.
Craft beer is like indie rock in a lot of ways, right? So like if Fugazi had signed to a major label, let's say, everybody would have called them sellouts. And like when you sell your brewery to a larger company, you're considered a sellout. And so it's a weird mindset, because the same people that are typing on their computers about what sellouts these breweries are and what it means to be independent are wearing Nikes and typing on their Apple. It's definitely attractive, right? It means my family's comfortable, my employees are comfortable and taken care of. I don't know. I don't know if that means compromising my values. But what makes me happy is that this is mine. People are enjoying this product that I created. That's what drives me to this day. It's not the money yet, because I haven't seen any money from this. And it's the kind of the pride in that, man, we did this, we pulled this off.
We have better beer, and we have better people, and we're more passionate. And that should win. Better beer, better people, more passion. I know enough about business to say that wins.